The city of Boise was waking up to the soft, cool embrace of early morning fog, a blanket that wrapped around the streets like a quiet secret. Officers Thomas Halcroft and Emma Mercer cruised through downtown in their patrol car, the familiar hum of the engine a steady companion. The sound of tires against asphalt was all they could hear, aside from the occasional crackling from the radio. It was just another quiet morning in Boise, Idaho. They hadn't expected anything special, just another shift patrolling the streets, half listening to the dispatcher's calm, routine messages while sipping lukewarm coffee. "Another day, another paycheck," Thomas muttered under his breath, wiping the rim of his coffee cup with his sleeve. Emma, sitting beside him, glanced at the empty streets, her hand instinctively tightening around the steering wheel. At 24, she was new to the job, eager to prove herself, to show she wasn't just another rookie who would burn out in a year. She had ambition and she wanted to make a difference, even if it was just in her own small corner of the world. The radio crackled again. The dispatcher's voice cut through the silence. "Dispatcher, calmly, blackmail report. Suspect described as a black male, navy jacket, mid-30s, involved in a vehicle break-in on Madison Avenue. Suspect seen in the area. Approach with caution." Emma's eyes lit up with determination. "Here we go," she said, her voice sharper than usual. Thomas nodded and pressed the gas pedal, steering the car toward Madison Avenue. He wasn't particularly concerned. It was just another report. They'd catch the guy, process the paperwork, and go on with their day. As they turned a corner near Grange Bakery, a man standing outside the busy cafe caught Emma's attention. He looked relaxed, almost too relaxed for someone who was supposedly a suspect in a break-in. He was flipping through something on his phone, one hand holding a croissant. A calm expression painted on his face as if he had no care in the world. He was standing in a crowd, but his posture set him apart. Emma's instincts kicked in. "There he is," she whispered, nodding toward him. Thomas glanced at him, squinting for a better look. "He fits the description, kinda. Navy jacket, late 30s. Probably him." They parked the car quickly, no sirens, no flashing lights. Emma was already out of the vehicle before Thomas could put it in park. "Hey! Hands where I can see them." The man, Kenton Morrow, looked up from his phone, startled but not panicked. His calmness made Emma feel a pang of hesitation, but she shook it off. "Excuse me, officer. I'm just standing outside a bakery, waiting for my ride." "What's going on?" "You fit the description of a suspect involved in a vehicle break-in." Kenton looked around, almost as if confused, but he wasn't scared. Not a flinch, not a sign of panic. He was just a man standing outside a bakery, holding a croissant. "I'm just waiting here for my driver." Before he could say anything else, Thomas stepped in, moving quickly, his hand near his holster. "Don't move," he commanded. "Let's not make this difficult. Just show us some ID and we can sort this out." Kenton didn't move, didn't resist. But Emma felt something, an uncomfortable quiet. There was no fear in his eyes, no fight, just an unshakable calm that unsettled her. "Resisting now, huh?" "I'm not resisting. I'm just standing here." The officers, frustrated and eager to finish the job, slapped the cuffs on him. As they twisted his arms behind his back, Kenton didn't make a sound. He didn't fight back, didn't protest. He didn't even seem angry. The bystanders, now gathering around the scene, began taking out their phones, whispering to each other. Emma, irritated by the crowd, gave them a sharp look but didn't care to engage. She was too focused on getting the paperwork done. Kenton sat in the back of the patrol car, staring out the window. His face was emotionless, as though he wasn't the one who'd just been arrested. Thomas glanced back at him in the rearview mirror, irritated by how calm Kenton seemed. "You got anything to say?" "I want my phone call." "You'll get it after booking." But there was something in Kenton's tone, something that made Emma uneasy. His calmness, his measured words, seemed off. It felt like he knew something they didn't. Emma looked at Kenton through the rearview mirror, but his expression hadn't changed. Her gut was telling her something wasn't right. The way Kenton held himself, controlled, almost too controlled, didn't fit the usual profile of someone they arrested. Usually they'd see fear or anger, or at least an attempt to argue. But Kenton just sat there, like it was an inconvenience to him, not a life-changing event. Another guy with a fake LinkedIn page, probably. They always have some story about their credentials. Maybe. But he doesn't look like the typical guy we arrest. Yeah, right. You're reading too much into it. At the precinct, the booking was slow. The clinking of keys, the shuffle of feet on tile floors, the hum of machines processing paperwork. Kenton was led through the station, and his calmness didn't waver. He didn't flinch, didn't resist. He was just another man walking through a building. Rob Tesh, the desk officer, blinked twice when he saw Kenton. There was something about the man that didn't sit right with him. He looked at the paperwork again, then back at Kenton. This guy really, yeah, fits the call. Nothing special. But Rob wasn't convinced. Kenton's calmness made him uncomfortable. It wasn't typical for someone who'd just been arrested. He ran his information again on the system, but everything seemed to check out. Yet something still felt off. Kenton was processed without much ceremony. His fingerprints taken, his mugshot snapped, and then he was led to a holding cell. As the door clanged shut behind him, Kenton sat down on the bench inside. He was still as the world around him moved on. The fluorescent lights in the precinct flickered above, casting a sterile, cold glow on the concrete floors. Kenton sat in the holding cell, his posture perfect, his arms still cuffed in front of him. He was a study in calm, his eyes unwavering as he stared at the wall in front of him. Across the room, Officers Thomas Halcroft and Emma Mercer stood near the vending machines, their voices low. They were still chuckling, trying to brush off the strange feeling Kenton left on them. But deep down, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. You think we got the wrong guy? Nah, just another one of those guys who think they can talk their way out of anything. We've seen it before. But Emma wasn't so sure. The way Kenton carried himself was different from the usual suspects. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even trying to explain himself. He was just waiting. It bothered her more than she cared to admit. Just then, Rob Tesh walked over to the desk, glancing at Kenton, then back at the computer screen. He hesitated before typing something into the system. Everything checks out, but something's off. Emma turned to look at him. She noticed the uncertainty in his eyes, and for the first time, she felt the gnawing sense of doubt that had been lingering all morning. What do you mean? He's just a guy we're processing. Why does it feel so wrong? It's just the way he's acting. I've been working here for years, and I've never seen someone arrested with that much control. Kenton sat quietly in the holding cell, his hands folded in front of him, wrists still restrained by the cuffs. He was the very picture of composure, unaffected by his current situation. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each second that passed making the silence heavier. It was as if the entire precinct was holding its breath, waiting for something to break the stillness. After a few moments, the officer at the desk called through the intercom. Hey, you've got one phone call. Make it quick. Kenton stood, moving with calm precision, as if he were going to make a business call rather than speaking with someone about his own arrest. He wasn't in a rush. He didn't seem anxious. It was a phone call like any other. Walking over to the phone, he picked it up with a steady hand and dialed a number without hesitation. His voice was clear and deliberate when the line picked up. This is Kenton Morrow. I need everything related to the Madison Avenue incident by this afternoon. I'll need full access to the files, including any body camera footage. Thank you. There was no trace of urgency in his tone, no signs of panic. He was simply laying out a request, as though the outcome had already been decided in his mind. He hung up before anyone could say another word. Back in the office, Thomas and Emma were filling out their report. There was a sense of satisfaction in the air. A job well done, they thought. But the nagging feeling that something wasn't right kept creeping back. It wasn't until later that day that the precinct received an unexpected email. It was flagged as urgent and opened quickly by the chief, his face going pale when he saw the subject line. Immediate release of detainee, Kenton L. Morrow. What the hell is this? Attached to the email was an official-looking document with Kenton Morrow's name on it, stamped with the state seal. It stated that Kenton's release was mandatory, as he was a special counsel for civil accountability, and that his case had been flagged for review by the Attorney General's office. This doesn't make sense. Within moments, Kenton was out of the holding cell, still dressed in the same sharp, calm manner. He walked past Thomas and Emma without a word, his steps steady and deliberate. Emma watched him leave, her stomach in knots. Kenton's ability to remain so composed, so unshaken, was starting to feel more and more like a power play. He wasn't a suspect. He wasn't just some guy who got unlucky. Kenton Morrow was something else entirely. It wasn't until later, when Thomas and Emma arrived at the precinct for their next shift, that they began to feel the weight of Kenton's influence. The building had a different feel to it, as if everyone was walking a little slower, speaking a little quieter. Thomas brushed it off at first, but Emma couldn't ignore the whispers. Officers who had never been afraid of authority were now looking over their shoulders, almost as if they knew something they didn't. The tension in the air was palpable. Even Rob Tesh, usually a quiet presence behind the desk, was acting differently. He wasn't speaking to anyone. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating before typing anything. Morrow. How did we not know? That moment Emma could feel it. Kenton's name was now hanging over the department like a cloud, and it wasn't going away anytime soon. His quiet power, his ability to move through the precinct without fear, was unsettling. He wasn't just a man they arrested. He was a force they couldn't ignore, and that scared them more than anything else. The following day, Thomas and Emma found themselves standing at the Boise courthouse, waiting to testify. They thought it would be another day in a courtroom, a routine appearance. They expected Kenton to show up with a lawyer, trying to make a case for his innocence. But when they walked into the courtroom, they immediately sensed that something was different. It was crowded, more so than usual. Journalists filled the front rows, cameras poised to capture the moment. Emma spotted someone from the city council, seated near the back. As they walked further into the room, they saw Kenton Morrow sitting at the front, not as the defendant but as someone with authority. His nameplate read, Special Counsel for Civil Accountability, State of Idaho. Emma froze for a second, her heart pounding. Thomas, whispering to her, "What the hell is this?" Kenton didn't acknowledge their presence. He didn't glance their way. He just flipped through a binder, reviewing the materials in front of him, like it was just another day at the office. The judge called the session to order. "Judge, we are here today for a procedural review regarding the actions taken during the Madison Avenue arrest. Mr. Morrow will be serving as an advisory member representing the state's Civil Accountability Office." Thomas and Emma's hearts sank. They weren't just testifying. They were under review. Kenton Morrow, the man they'd arrested, wasn't just some suspect. He was a man with power, and now he was in charge. The story of Kenton Morrow didn't begin on the streets of Boise. It started in Bakersfield, California, a place where opportunity was a luxury few could afford. Kenton was born into a working-class family. His mother, Deirdre Morrow, a night shift nurse at Mercy Hospital, and his father a transient figure who appeared and disappeared like the wind. Kenton's earliest memories were of the house smelling like antiseptic and the hum of the hospital ward. His mother worked long hours, and his father's absence left a void that never truly healed. But Kenton didn't dwell on what he didn't have. He focused on what he could control. From an early age, Kenton learned to observe. He watched the world around him closely, studied the way people moved, how they talked, and how they reacted. He was quiet, never loud or brash, and that made him invisible in a way that was often an advantage. While other kids acted out or sought attention, Kenton sat back and took it all in. his mind constantly working, analyzing. One of his earliest encounters with injustice happened when he was 12 years old. One day, his teacher accused him of stealing a calculator. It wasn't true, but no one asked any other students. No one searched their bags or lockers. Kenton's locker was searched, and when nothing was found, he was still made to stand in front of the class, humiliated. He said nothing. He didn't shout or fight back. He just stood there, feeling the sting of injustice without the ability to do anything about it. But that moment stayed with him. It wasn't the humiliation that burned him. It was the assumption that he was guilty without any evidence. He made a silent vow that one day, he would do something about the systems that allowed people like him to be treated unfairly. Kenton didn't let his past define him. He pushed forward, focusing on his studies, excelling in subjects that made him feel powerful in a way that physical strength never could. He earned a scholarship to UC Davis, where he majored in political science, writing essays that cut through the noise with clean, sharp arguments. He didn't raise his voice, but his words were clear, and they always struck deep. At Stanford Law School, Kenton's path took a sharp turn. While many of his peers chased high-paying corporate jobs, Kenton chose a different route. He interned with public accountability units in Alameda County, sitting in hearings where officers described routine stops that ended with broken ribs and bruised wrists. It wasn't the high-paying internships that got him attention. It was his calm determination and his ability to listen, to gather the stories that no one else was paying attention to. By 30, Kenton was an established voice in civil rights law, fighting for accountability in law enforcement. His work was quiet but persistent, and soon enough people began to notice. It wasn't long before he was appointed as special counsel for civil accountability in Boise, a position created in the wake of mounting concerns about police misconduct and lack of oversight. When Kenton arrived in Boise, he did so quietly. He didn't make a splash. He didn't announce his presence with grand gestures or speeches. He just showed up, sat down, and started to work. His first case was the Madison Avenue arrest, the one that had brought him face to face with Thomas Halcroft and Emma Mercer. But it wasn't just about a single arrest. It was about something much bigger. Kenton didn't care about revenge or getting back at individual officers. He was after the truth. He wanted to expose the system, the culture of assumptions and biases that had festered unchecked for years. Kenton's work was methodical, a slow burn that no one noticed at first. But as the months went on, the department began to feel the heat. It wasn't until that fateful day, the Madison Avenue arrest, that the officers realized just how far Kenton's reach extended. He wasn't just a lawyer with connections. He was someone with a deep understanding of the system and a will to change it. The precinct wasn't the same after Kenton's release. It wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. It was just quiet. Everyone seemed to be walking a little slower, speaking in hushed tones. The officers who had once walked with their heads high, their badges an unspoken symbol of authority, now moved with uncertainty. Thomas Halcroft felt it first. He'd been a cop for years, and he'd seen his share of people try to challenge the system. But Kenton was different. He wasn't loud. He wasn't aggressive. He didn't yell or demand attention. He simply was. And that was what unsettled Thomas the most. Kenton's calm authority made everything else feel trivial by comparison. It was as though the weight of the law wasn't in the badge, but in Kenton's very presence. Emma noticed it too. She couldn't shake the feeling that Kenton wasn't just here for the arrest. He was here for something bigger. Something she couldn't fully understand yet. Days after Kenton's release, the precinct was buzzing with rumors. Internal Affairs had started to ask questions about the arrest. The department had received word that Kenton's case was being reviewed not just internally, but by the state's Civil Oversight Board. The word audit was being tossed around more frequently. The officers who had worked with Kenton before were being questioned about their interactions with him. Thomas was one of the first to feel the pressure. He was used to dealing with complaints. He was used to the occasional report being filed against him. But this was different. Kenton Morrow wasn't just an ordinary suspect. He was a watchdog, and now he had set his sights on them. The tension grew in the precinct. Officers began to notice that Kenton's name was being mentioned more and more in briefings. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about what he represented. Kenton wasn't just exposing a single mistake. He was shining a light on a system. A system that had allowed racial profiling, unchecked assumptions, and excessive force to go unnoticed for far too long. Emma couldn't ignore it any longer. She was young. She had always believed in the idea of justice. But now she was starting to see the cracks in the system. The very system she'd sworn to uphold. Is that what this is? Just a mistake? Or is this something deeper? By now, Kenton had made his move. The department was in turmoil, but it wasn't a loud, chaotic mess. It was a silent shift, a quiet realization that they were no longer in control. Kenton wasn't just a person. They were beginning to understand that he was a force. And forces like him weren't easily stopped. The Boise courthouse wasn't grand. It wasn't imposing. It was simple. Gray walls, tiled floors, and an atmosphere that felt like bureaucracy at its coldest. But today something was different. The air was thick with anticipation. The gallery was unusually full, with journalists, city officials, and even some members of Boise City Council seated in the back, whispering among themselves. Thomas and Emma entered through the back door, their uniforms crisp and their postures stiff. They had done this countless times, walking into a courtroom to give testimony. It was routine. It was the end of a process. They expected Kenton to show up with a lawyer by his side, the usual defense for a man ours. If this story made you pause, made you feel something real, then don't let that feeling stop here. 'Cause stories like this, they aren't just about characters. They're about us, what we believe, what we assume, and what we choose to remember. We didn't share this just to entertain you. We shared this to remind the world of something we keep forgetting. Respect matters. Truth matters. And silence is not weakness. Sometimes the quietest people hold the loudest stories. The ones who've been hurt the most often carry the most strength. They don't need applause. They don't need revenge. They just need someone to finally see them, to see past the labels, to hear the silence behind their eyes, to say, I believe you, I see you. Because when someone has been overlooked their whole life, that one moment of recognition can feel like justice. And for those who laugh too soon, judge too fast, look down instead of leaning in, let this story be a mirror. The man in cuffs wasn't broken. He was built differently, stronger, quieter, and far more powerful than they ever imagined. And the truth he carried, it didn't need a courtroom. It didn't need permission. Just needed time. Because truth doesn't chase applause. Wait. And when the world is finally quiet enough to listen, speaks. So if this story reached something in you, share it. Not for the views. Not for the likes. But because someone else somewhere needs to feel what you just felt. Maybe they've been misjudged. Maybe they're hiding their truth behind silence. Maybe they're standing on the edge, wondering if anyone will ever look past the surface. Let this video be the hand that reaches them. Let it be the moment they realize they're not alone. Their story still matters. And what's true will always find its way home. We're not just here to tell stories. We're here to rewrite what the world thinks it knows. To honor those who stay silent until it matters most. So if you're still here, thank you. You're the reason we do this. You're the kind of person this world needs more of. Someone who listens. Someone who sees. Now take that heart and carry this forward. Because change doesn't start with noise. It starts with moments like this. Subscribe for more stories that challenge what we assume. That lift the veil on hidden truth. that remind us. One story, one moment of truth, can shift everything. And sometimes, the one they laughed at was the one who held all the power along. As the screen fades to black, remember this. Silence isn't empty. It's full of the things we never dared to say. And when it finally speaks, the world listens.